In the previous two lessons, we've talked about different types of elements. First off, there were atomic elements, elements that are made up of just one type of atom, and those atoms aren't bonded together. Then there were molecular elements, which are made up of one type of atom bonded together as molecules, but the molecules aren't bonded to other molecules. But there's one type of building block left. We've talked about atoms, we've talked about molecules, and in this lesson we're going to talk about crystals. A crystal element is made up of one type of atom, but there's something special about the way that one type of atom is arranged. Now remember, here's what we're not talking about. We are not talking about substances made up of more than one type of atom bonded together. If it's a pure substance made up of more than one type of atom, it has to be a compound, which is not the theme of this lesson. In this lesson, we're still talking about substances made up of just one type of atom, except they're bonded together in a specific way to make them a crystal. Now remember, an element, like I just said, is one type of atom. A crystal is a substance made up of a repeating pattern of either atoms or molecules. And if I combine these two terms together to make a crystal element, we find that it's got to be the same kind of atom bonded together in a repeating lattice pattern. But we've seen this before in the previous two lessons. Here are some examples of crystal elements. First off, gold, bismuth, and silver are all crystal elements because they're just one type of atom, except because they are solid substances, they're bonded together in such a way that the atoms make a repeating pattern with one another, and that makes them crystal elements. One type of atom in a repeating pattern as a solid. Another example of a crystal element that's a little bit different would be that sulfur crystal that we looked at before. What makes this different? Well, notice it's still one type of atom, except those atoms are bonded as molecules, and then those molecules are bonded in the crystal network. That makes this a crystal element because we have a repeating pattern of sulfur molecules. It's still an element because there's still just one type of atom, but it's a crystal because it's a solid that's bonded with its molecules in a repeating pattern. Another example of a crystal element would be the bromine that we looked at before. This is the bromine that's frozen so that the individual bromine molecules are locked into a fixed place and are vibrating. Here's an interesting fact about any substance that's an element. If an element is a gas or a liquid, if you lower its temperature so much past its freezing point that it turns into a solid, it turns into a crystal element. Any substance that's an element that's also a solid has to be a crystal element. So now you understand the three different types of elements. There are atomic elements, molecular elements, and crystal elements that are made up of the same kind of atom bonded together in a repeating pattern, either as individual atoms in a repeating pattern or molecules made of the same kind of atom in a repeating pattern.